Welcome to the Brain People Podcast, a show where four mental health experts team up to bring you practical tools for overcoming mental health challenges. The Brain People don't replace your doctor or therapist, but we will give you some extra tools to help you on your journey. So join us as we fight mental illness, one episode at a time.
Welcome to the Brain People Podcast. I'm your host for this episode, and my name is Amanda Anguish, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm joined by my co-host.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Katie Crews. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist.
And we're going to be talking about one of our favorite topics, which is core beliefs. But if you haven't listened to some other episodes that Katie has done, I know, on core beliefs, you can stop and go watch those first and then come back, because we're going to get a little bit deeper and more specific in this episode. And we're going to talk about a very specific core belief. So, Katie, what is one of the most popular or common core beliefs that people have?
Yeah, Amanda, it's quite amazing to just see this theme in a lot. I would say the vast majority of my clients, and I'm sure for your clients as well.
It's actually one of the examples that I use when I'm doing it. So it's very interesting that we're talking about it today.
It's the I'm not good enough, right? And there's different versions of that. I'm not smart enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not
enough.
Fill in the blank. And often I'll tell people, like, think for a moment and you'll find at least, a couple. But the general belief is I'm not good enough.
Mm-hmm. So why do you think so many of us have that belief?
I think that it starts for most people in childhood. And if you think about the enough component, a lot of things can contribute to that. Obviously, there could be some major life events like trauma. And in the other episodes, we've talked about, how core beliefs are formed. But then even smaller things. So this is an example I often give to my clients with I'm not good enough, is if you were constantly compared to a sibling.
Mm-hmm.
That comparison alone can start to create this belief, I'm not good enough. I'm not as smart as my brother, or I'm not as athletic. My parents love or praise my brother or my sister more than me. And so even small things like that happen gradually or repeatedly over time can start to be like that pebble in your shoe that starts to annoy more and more. And then all of a sudden it's this big belief, I am not good enough.
And it doesn't even have to be that overt, like saying, oh, you're not like your sibling or whatever. I think even sometimes it can be where if somebody keeps pointing out something that somebody has been doing, you can often translate that, well, I'm not doing that, or I'm not enough because I'm not. And they may have never said that you're not doing that, but just the emphasis on somebody else doing it. But
yeah, and I think, so that's childhood, but then there are so many life events and we don't really have time to name each one.
Mm-hmm.
It can be within the religious context of not meeting a certain standard constantly. What we see a lot today with social media, you're seeing different people's lives and you're comparing. So comparison is a big one. I'm not skinny enough, right? Which is so sad. TikTok as contributing to a lot of eating disorders recently and so forth, because there's this constant comparison. So whether it's overt, as you mentioned, explicit or implicit, it's easy for us to start to develop the sense of I'm not enough.
Yeah, a hyper focus on it. It seems to be that it gives us the impression that we're not good enough. So what are the negative effects that this has on us? Like, what is this doing to us when we have this belief?
So we're going to answer that by breaking it down piece by piece. So the first piece is the I am.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes
we're going to dissect the belief.
Exactly. So the I am, before we get to the not good enough, is identity.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about what are the negative effects, well, this isn't just a belief. This isn't just a thought that I have. This is an identity issue. I am. And then whatever comes after that, what you're saying is I'm placing all of my worth and my value on whatever that may be. And so the weight of this belief is huge because of this identity I am.
Mm-hmm. So you're talking about the fact that when I say I am, it's kind of, I call it a behavior that we hyper focus on ourselves and who we are versus just anything else that could be going on around us, or I'm focusing on me versus looking out around me and seeing other people even.
Yeah. And so if we put all of our eggs in one basket, saying this is all of who I am, when things threaten that, it crumbles, right, really quickly.
Yeah.
So an example of this, and I'll mention this a little bit later on with confusing our roles with identity, is I refrain from saying I am a psychologist. I say I work as a psychologist. Why? Because I've seen this with my clients. When you retire, when something happens and I can no longer work as a psychologist, if I believe I am something and that's my identity, when something threatens that, then my worth is gone. And this is why so many people are struggling with their worth, is because they're over-identifying with other things. And one of the podcast episodes that we'll maybe do in the future is on identity itself. Yeah. And one popular thing that's happening recently is that we're over-identifying with a few variables of our lives. And then when that is not secure, which they're not, then our worth, our value, and depression, anxiety, and other consequences come from that heavy weight that we place on I am.
Yeah, I've seen people do this even with their jobs when they retire. What happens if you ever identify with what you do in your work? Like you were saying, psychologist, but anything that we do, even if the job isn't taken from us and we retire at 65 years old, well, who are we after that? And we might go crazy because, well, this is who I was. I didn't realize I had other options to identify as well.
We do this with our feelings, right? I am anxious. I am depressed. And so we want to be careful with the I am and not putting so much of our identity in, we'll talk about this in a moment, of what we do.
Yeah. So the I am part is how we identify. What about the rest of the belief?
The not good enough or not smart enough, not skinny enough, fill in the blank. Let's focus on the enough. What is enough?
I haven't looked at it. No, it's true. This is so powerful. When I talk with people so often, these are things we've never defined.
Yes, exactly.
We're labeling ourselves a certain way, but yet we don't even know what the label actually is because we've never defined it.
So what that means, Amanda, is if we haven't defined where the line is, enough is a moving target.
Oh, that aches.
Smart enough, we don't define it. So what that becomes is a moving target. I think that smart enough is this, and then you meet someone who is smarter than that, and then you moved it, and I'm not good enough. Skinny, we see this. Oh, it's terrible when you look at just the fluctuations of definition of beauty. Basically, it's fluctuating so often that you're never pretty enough, or with your body image, you're never skinny enough, or then all of a sudden it changes. You're not curvy enough, right? And this happens with style as well, right? It's kind of interesting as you get older and you're like, wow, it's coming back around. I should shave my clothes.
I'm going to put everything in a box and open the box back up in 20 years and then it'll be back in style.
You can never work enough. It's a moving target, which if you think about it, if you're chasing a moving target, you never meet it, which means you're caught in a cycle of anxiety, of disappointment, of depression, and so on.
And I've noticed, especially with perfectionism, if people have issues with perfectionism, they definitely have an issue with that moving target because, and I know some of you can't see what I'm doing, but if I say this is perfect, well, what do we do when we got to move my arm. When I get close to it, I realize, wait, if I'm getting that close, it must not be perfect because perfect isn't attainable, and so I move perfect up higher, and then so I keep moving it and moving it and moving it, because in the back of my mind, as much as I believe I'm supposed to be perfect, I also believe that it's an unattainable thing, so I have to keep moving it.
And perfectionism is very linked to the belief I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
This is also linked to procrastination, right? Because if I'm not good enough, then I'm going to procrastinate, or I'm going to want to do it perfectly, but then I can't. So then I procrastinate. A lot of issues, procrastination, perfectionism, and the list could go on, is related to I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough is the core, it's the root. And these other things are just the fruits. And so many times we're like, oh, what do I do for procrastination? What do I do for perfectionism? And it's like, well, yes, you can do these different strategies that are helpful. And I think self-help books often tend to focus on the strategies, but we want to address the core, which is worth and value.
Yeah. So what does this, like, what does the average person look like who believes this? Like, what is their life? What are they doing? What are they not doing? We talked about perfectionism, but we also talked about procrastination. When I see people who have this belief, I don't see productivity, I see overproductivity. I always talk to people with their, think of it as a spectrum. You're going to have one end of the spectrum and then the other end of the spectrum. And we don't tend to go anywhere in the middle. We just kind of fly from one side to the other. And so if somebody is wondering, like, do I have this belief? Maybe they haven't done the work. What might their life look like?
Great question, Amanda. And I think you already started to answer it. Is you take that spectrum and it's extreme on either end, and we could apply that to different areas of our life. So going off of the body image, right? Where some people on one extreme, I'm not good enough, will not care for themselves whatsoever, maybe struggle with being overweight and poor hygiene.
Yeah.
And then the other extreme might be perfectionism, and they're counting all their calories and hyper-focusing on their body, maybe struggling with anorexia, right? Just extremes. You take then smart, right? I'm not smart enough. One person might completely give up and not even try. What's the point? Another person on the other end might think, oh, I'm not smart enough. I need to be smarter. I'm going to overstudy and be super stressed and so forth. And so just take the different categories and look at those extremes. And which we'll get to, is the balance will be this sense of peace of, because I know who I am, I'm going to do what I want to do and what's good for me to do, but I'm not pulled to the extremes because I believe that I'm not enough.
I think that's really key. I like that you brought up, like, having a sense of who I am, because then we have to ask the question, well, who am I? Like, we don't just automatically know who we are. That's why we're struggling with this core belief that I'm not good enough, because if I truly knew who I was through and through, good and bad, I probably wouldn't be hyper-focusing on this belief.
Exactly. And so, Amanda, one of the things that we have to realize with this belief is how we have to change the way that we define our worth and our value, kind of answering that question, who am I? And the two main things that I see that people erroneously define their worth on or based off of is what they do and what other people think. Yes. So doing, for example, you can see this in society today. When you meet someone, one of the first questions they ask you is,
what do you do for a living?
Exactly. We're sizing each other up because we so highly value work. And that's one of the major things that we do, that that person's a physician. Boop, 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 right? Like ding, 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 like several points up of worth. Oh, you're whatever. I remember in college, whenever someone would ask, like, oh, what are you studying? Right? Because they know you're not doing yet. What are you studying? And you would see different people's reactions in how they're viewing you and how they value you. And psychology at that time, for some people, were like, right? I'm sure you got that as well. And so that could have been a temptation for me to then not feel as worthy because society does this. We determine a lot of our worth based off of what we do. And one of the most primary ways is what we do for a living.
In all fairness, I don't want people to feel bad about asking what people do for a living, because for me, when I ask somebody that, and maybe I need to find another question to ask, but one of the reasons I like to ask that question is not to size somebody up. Well, maybe it is to size them up in one way, but because I'm genuinely interested in knowing what interests them. So if I know what their job is, it kind of gives me a clue as to, well, what do you find fascinating or enjoyable in the world, that it's kind of like a starting point, and then I can get to know you a little bit based on that. The age isn't really going to tell me too much about the person. Maybe like, what do you like to do as a hobby would be a better question.
What do you do with your time?
Yeah. What's fascinating to you lately? That would be.
It's not the question itself, but really noticing that society is really structured this way.
Yeah.
Now, another doing, right? Because sometimes we just focus on career, but doing is related to appearance. If I do more with my appearance, I can feel more worthy.
Yeah.
This is why a lot of people struggle with their worth when it comes to aging. I get a lot of clients as they start to age because they can no longer do as in their appearance. They can no longer do as much with their physical ability. We overemphasize our worth dependent on also what we can do. I'm an athlete, I'm a runner, right? The I am. And so when you start to lose those abilities, it can really attack your sense of self-worth. But also doing in relation to religion. I feel more worthy as a Christian if I'm in 3 different ministries and 3 different positions, right? Oh, that person's a pastor, right? That person is fill in the blank.
I better be good right now because they're probably watching me and going to
because you view them on this pedestal. And again, it's because we overemphasize worth being dependent upon what you do. Mothers do this a lot.
Parents do it. I mean, mostly mothers. Yeah,
but both, for sure.
That. Yeah.
So if I do more for my kids, and this is where sometimes they say, actually, I'm not a good enough mother. And so I don't know if you have any other examples of how we depend our worth upon what we do, but I'm trying to give a broad enough enough examples.
Absolutely. And then you mentioned that other question too, but if I'm a mother and I'm putting my value or my worth on if I'm good enough, well, what happens when these people over here, because it's not just what do I think of myself, but also what other people, because that was that other part of it.
Yes.
Well, now if I'm a mother and I have people telling me I'm not doing enough of this, but then on the other hand, some people are saying you're not doing enough of this too, I'm doomed.
So yeah, let's just go there, right? So one, we determine our worth based off of what we do, and then we determine it based off of what other people think. And you just highlighted that conflict. Why it's so bad or why it's so unhelpful is because other people's opinions are changing. They conflict, right? So it's not enough because it's never enough, right? All of a sudden, one says you need to be homeschooling, and then other people are saying, no, you need to go to school. Homeschooling is bad for your kids. And then you're conflicted because you don't know who you are truly.
You need to be working. No, you need to be home with your kids. And so you're like, how do I get a sense of myself being okay if I'm constantly hearing from other people?
I think this is one of the roots of feminism, right? Feminism has created, I know that there's good in it in the sense of they were trying to fight back.
The first and second stages of feminism.
Yeah, they try to fight back the I'm not good enough. Like, women, you are good enough. But at this point, they're like, oh, well, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this, right? Even some aspects of like becoming like a man.
Yeah.
That you're actually creating the very same or reinforcing the very same belief that you're not good enough. I remember when I got married and it was like, okay, well, I'm working and now I got to be a good wife and I need to bake bread for, like all these added layers. And I remember.
Are you having children yet?
Exactly, right? It's never enough. Exactly. So other people's and their opinions, this is where we go to social media. The more likes that I have, the more followers, I feel better about myself. This is also where after something that we do, if we don't get kudos, if we don't get feedback,
if
positive,
the algorithms don't make my post show up on time and I can't see that I have 10 likes at least in the first 10 minutes, then something's wrong.
So notice that we're so dependent upon what other people think. And notice for doing, why that's so problematic is because doing is never enough, but also it's not reliable. I'm going to retire one day. I'm going to age one day. Style's going to change, right? Fill in the blank. And that isn't a stable foundation for your worth.
No.
And with other people and their opinions are always changing as well. So notice it's for both of those, it's a very shaky foundation. And that's why if you depend your worth upon those two things, you're forever going to struggle with I'm not good enough.
Yeah, and that doesn't even take into consideration, I just learned a new term. Sorry if I'm behind. It's called, I think it's a German term called Schadenfreude, and it means people who take pleasure in other people's pain. So we don't even know if some of that is coming, other people's opinions is coming from people who are either trolls or, they take joy in other people's pain. So how do I even know to trust the opinions of others?
Yeah, and I will often tell my clients, wait, what? You are depending your worth upon these people that you don't even like?
Mm-hmm.
Or know, and they're, I call them unreliable sources, right? You can't quote them in a research study, right? You can't, we have to have good primary resources.
I don't know their name. I just know they're AJLXZ954.
Exactly. Or when we're so afraid of being in public and, what if someone thinks this about me? Who are they to you and why do they matter? So we put too much weight into both of these things and the foundation is very unstable, which means you're never going to feel good enough.
And I see too, as this whole concept of my value coming from what other people say is society is also reinforcing the idea that my opinion matters. Mm-hmm. So then I feel compelled to give people my opinion on something that I may not be an expert in. I don't know enough about it, or I don't know enough about this person's life to even offer my opinion on what they're doing. And yet then that person is going to hear my opinion and go, oh, wow, I must not be good enough because she said that, but I don't even have an expertise in that field.
Mm-hmm. So the question then is begged, right? What do I determine my worth on, right? What's the strong foundation? If it's not based off of what I do, it's not based off of what other people think, then how do I build this house of self-worth?
Dun, da, da, da.
Thank you for that, right? Now, I start with the very basic human. The fact that you are human automatically gives you worth.
I agree.
And so where we're going to go next, people may disagree with, but this fact alone, you're human. And this is where I ask people, do you think all children are worthy? Of course, right? Notice they're not, nothing.
You don't have to have a religious perspective to say that.
Exactly. And people wouldn't disagree with that. What they do with their worth then later on in life is their choice, but everyone is worthy regardless of what they do, regardless of what people think. So human. Now, you could go down the route of, how do you think humans came about? There's different opinions about that. We're going to take the perspective of the Bible and what it teaches about humans being created. Now, before I go there, I often will have people think about this. What determines the value of a product?
If people will buy it?
If people will buy it. We're going to go there in a moment. What else?
Who made it?
Yeah.
Its brand.
Yeah. Brand, designer. And then the one that's related to that is material.
Yeah.
And so those last two, designer and material, you can think about. I was walking in the mall and I passed by, I think it was Louis Vuitton or something. And they have these terrible looking shoes. And sometimes I'm like, if you have these shoes, I'm sorry. But it was these tennis shoes with this huge buckle on it that was with diamonds and other things. And I'm like, wow, well, people will buy it because of the designer.
Yep.
Right. It has value
associated with it.
And so with creation, versus evolution. There's a designer, right?
Mhm.
And it's the God of the universe. And so if I had more time, I would ask people to really just like sit with that and realize, wow, like creator of the universe, designer of, if you look at the galaxy, if you think that's beautiful, you look at the sunset, if you think that's beautiful, created you. Ding, 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 ding.
If you
Huge
can
amounts of
say
work.
anything outside is beautiful, whoever made that also made you.
Exactly. And then the creation narrative tells us God spoke everything. But then when it came to humanity, he knelt down, he formed it with his own hands, and then he breathed into it, right?
Mhm.
That's an intimacy that shows not a designer that designed something and then left his product, right?
Yeah, or had their junior designer design it for them and then they slapped their name on it.
Exactly. It's wonderfully, right? There's a verse that says you're fearfully and wonderfully made. And then it goes on and it says, I know this full well. David probably had good self-worth.
Yeah.
Do I know that full well that I am beautifully designed? And when you study the human brain, when you study the cells and what happens in your body, that is where our worth needs to be anchored in.
It boggles my mind that everything that humans make, what do they look to model it after? Something that God has made.
Yeah. If we think about AI and be like, wow, that's so impressive. Well,
how about the human brain?
Exactly. So creation, and I'd encourage people to really study what creation means in relation to worth by design, Louis Vuitton, and I don't know much about style, you can tell, but top name brands, right? It could be like something that's very cheap, but because it has that name, so designer and the material. But then the other thing you mentioned was the price, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes it's not made with great material. Sometimes the design's not very nice, like Crocs. And I know a lot of people wear Crocs. I'm sorry.
I do have a pair of flip-flops that are Crocs, but I don't take any offense to it. They're very practical.
There you go. But people are willing to pay a good price. I'm sure Crocs are probably like
expensive.
What I'm saying is it probably doesn't take much money to create them, right, to produce them. But people are willing to pay, I think it's like 80 or however much. But the price, right, there are many products out there that it's not by a good designer. It's not by the material. Material, you might think about leather or other things that are more costly. It's simply the price that someone is willing to pay. And so we have creation, but then we have redemption, right? God not only created us and didn't leave us, he then, the price of his very own son, and not just the son, but Romans 5 talks about how maybe for a good man you would die, but for an enemy, right, which is like mind-boggling, that Jesus, perfect human being, also divine, was willing to die for you, that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us, right? He demonstrates his love, or I would say he demonstrates our worthiness by dying.
The value to him that we are.
Yes. And so if you realize what's happening here, worth isn't dependent on what we do. It's dependent on what he has done, which it's already done, which means my worth, this foundation is solid and can never change. What people think about me, what I do, whether I do or not. And so some people have like pushed back on this and say, but that's not going to motivate me. Like if I do and I have that pressure to do. But what actually happens is because we realize our worth, what we actually do, and maybe on the outside, our life doesn't look super different in what we're doing, right? Two psychologists could still be working as a psychologist.
Yeah.
But there's a peace. There's less anxiety, less depression, less this desperation of seeking your worth. And so what happens is instead of trying to create more value, the arrow is reversed. I do because I recognize my value.
And even those two psychologists could be doing the same thing, but what happens in one of them when they're doing extra work inside that internal work? Because I always, some people, I'm sure they tell you the same. How do you do what you do every day and listen to people's problems and that sort of thing? Like, I would just die if I had to do that all day.
Good idea. I should quit.
Yeah. I mean, I had to come to terms with this very early on. Like, how do I not, succumb to the weight of everything that I'm taking on? And I remember one time, it was after actually reading Hebrews 11. By faith, I'm doing these things. Every single day that I do my job, I'm not looking for an outcome. Mm-hmm. There's nothing. I mean, obviously, I want people to do well. I want them to be happy and fulfilled and at peace in their lives. But I'm not doing it for that reason. I'm doing that because I just know it's the right thing to do. And I know that the reward is in the future, in heaven one day, that God is going to, I would love to see all these people there and that sort of thing.
Different motivation.
It's a different motivation. But if I did it every single day because, well, if I don't make sure this person gets better today, then it means I'm a bad therapist. If I don't get this person to do what I think they're supposed to be doing or believe what I think they're supposed to be believing, then somehow it reflects poorly on me. And so there's a different weight that you take with you into that profession or job or whatever you want to call it, when you know that you're not doing it. And the very thing you mentioned, early on, the very thing that causes us sometimes to believe that I'm not good enough is because I didn't get the very thing in the beginning that God is giving me, which now fulfills that part, and I can go and do the thing that I need to do.
Yeah. And I just love, let's take what we just talked about with creation and redemption and then apply what that looks like in these different areas. With my body image issues, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, right? Like, God made and designed my body. Now, of course, we talk about being healthy. So if someone has body image concerns because they're not healthy, that's different. But God formed this beautiful body. How do I learn to love it? Mm-hmm. And then you say, I'm struggling with my self-worth in relation to my intelligence. Right? God made your brain to be highly intelligent. Now, we might have some limitations, but this is also where I love the idea of in the Bible where it talks about us being the body of Christ. Yeah. That some are the hands, some are the feet, right? The hand can't tell the foot, I don't need you. So then what we do is we say, oh, God uniquely made me, because this is where it eliminates the comparison, right? Amanda, you and I are different therapists. Mm-hmm. And I've heard clients to be like, sometimes compare. And there's this temptation to buy into that. And it's like, no, Amanda is different than me. And the more and more that I recognize the truths of creation and redemption, it allows me to then think and meditate on, how did God uniquely make me? And then that hushes all the voices of other people, of society. Doesn't matter how many friends I have, doesn't matter how many likes or how I dress, because God becomes an anchor in which you become immovable.
Mm-hmm. And that it's such a beautiful thing to think about that too, in terms of like even the disciples. Christ chose 12, but they were all very different personalities. And some of them were seemingly quite dysfunctional too.
Some of them were comparing to one another.
Yeah, they were definitely, even the brothers were comparing themselves to each other. And yet Jesus, the way he treated them was that you're all loved by me. You're spending way too much time doing that. That's not even a question.
Yeah.
And they all had their own specific purpose in the work too.
And basically, Amanda, you can go throughout the Bible and constantly find different ways which the narrative of worth is completely flipped in the Bible. It's very countercultural. And so I just encourage people to really dwell on these two major elements of creation and redemption, but then further, right, to search God's word and say, what does it really say? Because we're too often consuming culture. And so we're all going to really struggle with our worth because we don't know what is our anchor.
That sounds like a challenge too. What you're saying is to pay attention to where you're getting your reinforcement of. So that sounds like a challenge. So it sounds like then the challenge is to first assess, where do I get my information from? Or how much time am I spending in this version of where my value or worth comes from versus this determination of where I get my value and worth from?
And I love that you highlight that, Amanda, because it's a very practical step that people can start taking. Let me limit what I'm consuming that is really either directly or indirectly informing my self-worth, including media. That's a big one. But also people around you. Do you have people around you that are saying that you're not good enough or treating you that way? If you're a child, you don't have that control, maybe with your friends, maybe.
Yeah.
But especially as adults, that then parents can think about for their children. But then, so reducing the unhealthy sources and then increasing the healthy sources, including what we mentioned with the biblical narrative of your worth. And again, if people disagree with that, then where they land is human, and just studying the human and how beautiful it is, whether you believe in a designer or not. But just that fact alone shows the ultimate value of humans, regardless of who you are.
Yeah, and it reminds me too, where Paul says to think of others as better than yourself. So if you're dealing with somebody that's also struggling with if they're good enough or not, maybe for some of us who are, interacting with those people, maybe we want to focus less on the external features of things when we compliment. I know how easy it is sometimes to go, oh, you're so cute, or you're so pretty, those sorts of things, and to focus more on character, qualities that stay pervasive no matter what we look like or what age we are or what gender we identify as or whatever the case might be, that those are qualities that we can focus on.
Which is part of the Bible emphasizes different, determinants of worth, things that are not fading versus what the world shares.
Well, this has been a great springboard for hopefully lots of conversations that our listeners are having either with themselves or with their families or even their social group, to start paying attention to how we identify, and especially that core belief of, am I good enough? Or I'm not good enough, if they identify with that. So thank you so much for joining us for this episode, and we want to welcome you to listen again to those other 2 on core beliefs that we have out already. If you want to go back and listen to that and then come back and listen to this one again, or just go and listen to those in addition, we really are glad that you join us each time, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe. Your engagement will help us reach more people who need encouragement. To hear more episodes, learn about our other mental health resources, or support us financially, visit thebrainpeoplepodcast.com.